I think my core fear, the thing that scares me more than anything else, that has always scared me more than anything else, is surrendering control, or rather, not being in control of my own destiny. And I trace this back to how defiant of a child I was. I was always very opinionated. I did not waver in the face of criticism, threats, pushback, even violence. I stood my ground, which is quite unusual for a kid, especially a kid who was homeschooled and their only real connections to the world was through their family. You would think that such tenacity would be impossible in an environment like that. But through the strength of my personality, I stood my ground. And I think a big reason why I stood my ground was because I'm terrified of surrendering control, or having others calling the shots, having others in the driver's seat, rather than me. A point of growth for me has been learning to surrender more control to other people. Something I've always said is, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. I've always talked about lessening my dependence, not just on others, but also on institutions, on technology, any external thing that I don't exert direct control over. I've said in so many videos how I intend on lessening my dependence on those things. Even just my interest in something like GNU Linux, for example. A part of why I like free software so much is because you literally control the software. You can do whatever you want to it. Whereas, things that are closed source, you are not afforded that liberty. So, this is something I can trace back far, and it's something that extends to all kinds of different areas of my life. But I think there comes a point when you have to surrender some measure of control. And one of the main examples of that I can give two. I'll start with one that might be more relatable to people. Now, I stayed at No Thank You's house, and I'm not going to say, what exactly he didn't want me to do there, or what all of the context was, simply because that's a matter of his personal privacy. But to put it really simply, he felt responsible for me in some way because I was in his home and because I was his friend. And at the time, I didn't really understand this. At the time, I thought this was no more than an effort to limit my own power over myself, and that this was dictatorial in nature. Like, I went so far as to call it, literally 1984. Why are you trying to control my behavior? Even if it's something destructive to me, I should have the right to make that decision, and that it's more of a moral, it's more worthy of moral condemnation of you and your attempt to control me than it is, for me to do something to myself that happens to be negative. But the thing that he impressed upon me, that I came to understand, was that it doesn't just affect me. it also affects him because he cares about me. And so it wasn't just a matter of my decisions existing in isolation. Um, my response at first was to say, well, it's your fault for feeling that way. Um, maybe if you didn't want to control me, you wouldn't feel that way. And if you still feel that way, then you should change it. Or I would just say the feelings didn't matter, which is, not, that's not a very good argument, especially if you say you care about the person. Depending on how much you care about them, then um, it you sort of have an obligation to recognize their responsibility for you in the friendship and your responsibility to them, and then adhere to the social contract that had been let out, um, that had been laid out. And so I came to internalize this, um, and it really changed the way that I see my close friendships, which, to be fair, I don't have very many of those, but it it changed the way I approach them, especially with regard to how I treat myself and how I behave. I developed, you could say, a more collectivistic mindset surrounding it, whereas before I just had, full rugged individualism, and I thought, anything deviating from that was like super immoral, that it was like some tanky shit. But then you could say I started seeing like a state. um the other example I could give is my girlfriend. um there are plans that we have made together or that we've enacted together that have required me to adapt aspects of myself that I wouldn't have changed for anybody else, that have required me to consider not just what's good for me, but also what's good for her, what's good for the both of us, and to attempt to move in that direction based on an acknowledgement of all of those factors. And this has changed my trajectory, because it's not just about me, it's about me and her. And the level of control that dynamic, and her presence dictates over me is not something that I would have ever been comfortable with in the past. But I think it took some growth on my part for me to acknowledge that and to feel entirely comfortable with that. Because now I am. And now I want nothing more than to see all of these plans that we've imagined together come to fruition. And every day I'm doing my part to see that occur. And so that's a surrender of control. And I think I'm a happier person because I've surrendered that control.